Hey, what's up, everybody? This is B. Howard. It seems a lot of people are speaking on my behalf and this TMZ thing and all that. So, and whatever the DNA test comes out to be, the results is what it is.
To some fans, B. Howard looks like somebody photocopied Michael Jackson in 1987, left the copy machine jammed overnight, and accidentally created a whole new person. The cheekbones? Michael. The voice? Michael. The moves? Suspiciously, Michael. So when this young singer stepped into the spotlight insisting, "I am not Michael Jackson's son," the internet basically responded with, "Well, about that." And just like that, the rumors exploded. Suddenly, there were alleged DNA tests floating around online, whispers of secret relationships, estate drama, and fans analyzing this man's face like it was the Zapruder film. So who exactly is B. Howard, and why has his story refused to die for more than a decade? Buckle up, because this celebrity mystery is messy, weird, and just believable enough to keep people hooked. Who is B. Howard, and why does he look like that? Let's start from the very beginning, because if you don't know who B. Howard is, you are absolutely missing out on one of the most intriguing figures in the music industry today. And trust me, the intrigue has very little to do with his music, at least as far as the internet is concerned. Born Brandon Howard, B. Howard is an American singer, songwriter, and musician. By all accounts, the man is genuinely talented. He's got range, he's got stage presence, and he's got a catalog of music that shows real artistry. He's been working in the industry quietly, but steadily, releasing music, building a fan base, and doing what any serious musician does, putting in the work. But here's where things get deliciously complicated. The moment people started paying attention to Brandon Howard, they weren't just noticing his talent. They were noticing his face, his bone structure, the way he moves when he performs, the tone of his voice, and the whispers started almost immediately. Whispers that this young man bore an uncanny, almost unsettling resemblance to one Michael Joseph Jackson, the king of pop, the greatest entertainer who ever lived. Now look, resemblances happen. Doppelgangers exist. The world is a big place and faces repeat themselves. But when the resemblance is this specific, the same sharp jawline, the same soulful eyes, the same effortless musicality, people start asking questions. And once people on the internet start asking questions, darling, there is no putting that genie back in the bottle. So who is Brandon Howard's mother? That would be Mickey Howard, a celebrated R&B and jazz singer who was very much active in the music industry during the same era that Michael Jackson was at the very height of his powers. Mickey Howard had connections to the same music world Michael Jackson moved in, and that proximity was enough to send the rumor mill into overdrive. The question that nobody could stop asking was simple, scandalous, and irresistible. Was Mickey Howard ever romantically involved with Michael Jackson? And if so, what did that relationship produce? What actually lit this whole powder keg on fire? Oh, we're just getting started because in 2014, someone decided to get scientific about it. The 2014 DNA bomb that broke the internet. Okay, so here we are, 2014. Michael Jackson has been gone for 5 years. The world is still grieving, still fascinated, still hungry for anything connected to his legacy. And then, out of nowhere, a story drops that sends shockwaves through every entertainment news outlet on the planet. A DNA test. Not just any DNA test. A DNA test that claimed with a staggering 99% accuracy that Brandon Howard was biologically related to Michael Jackson. That is the kind of number that, under normal circumstances, would be absolutely earth-shattering. But here's where the story starts to get messy. And honey, this is where we really need to pay attention, because the details matter enormously. The test in question reportedly used a dental imprint belonging to Michael Jackson. Not a blood sample, not a hair follicle from a court-verified source. A dental imprint. Now, even for those of us who are not forensic scientists, alarm bells should be going off right about now. The chain of custody for something like a celebrity's dental imprint is, to put it generously, questionable. Where did it come from? Who verified it? What laboratory conducted the analysis? These are the kinds of questions that serious scientists and legal experts ask, and the answers that came back were, shall we say, deeply unsatisfying. The company behind the test was a DNA testing firm called DNA Diagnostics, and while the test results generated enormous media attention, they also generated enormous skepticism from experts who understood exactly how DNA testing works, and more importantly, how it can be manipulated or misrepresented. Almost immediately, voices in the scientific and legal community began raising red flags. Experts immediately questioned both the methodology and the DNA source itself, and what experts found did not hold up to scrutiny. Wikipedia's documentation of the incident is particularly telling. According to verified records, the 2014 tests were ultimately deemed inconclusive. Not definitive, not proof. Inconclusive. The Jackson estate, which has never been shy about defending Michael Jackson's legacy when they feel it is under attack, issued no acknowledgement of the claim whatsoever. And crucially, there was no lawsuit filed by Brandon Howard or anyone representing him. Because here's the thing, thing. If you genuinely believe you are the biological child of one of the wealthiest entertainers in history, and you have a 99% DNA match in your hands, you file a lawsuit. You contact an attorney, you pursue your legal rights. That is what people do. None of that happened. So the DNA results were explosive, the experts were skeptical, and the estate was completely silent. But what did the man at the center of all of this actually have to say? Because B. Howard's response to all of this is honestly the most fascinating part of the entire story. B. Howard opens his mouth and shocks everyone. Here is where the narrative takes a turn that absolutely nobody expected. When the story exploded in 2014, when every tabloid was running headlines, when social media was losing its collective mind, when the name Brandon Howard was suddenly on everybody's lips for reasons that had nothing to do with his music, most people assumed that B. Howard would either go into high everything and disappear or fully lean into the attention. In the age of social media and celebrity culture, the second option is almost always more tempting. B. Howard chose neither. Instead, he did something genuinely surprising. He stepped in front of a camera, looked directly into the lens, and gave one of the most carefully measured, deliberately calm responses you will ever see from someone at the center of a media firestorm. In his 2014 video statement, which is still out there for anyone who wants to watch it, Brandon Howard laid out his position with striking clarity. He stated plainly that he had never reached out to TMZ or any other media outlet to push the story. He had never, at any point, proclaimed himself to be Michael Jackson's son. He had absolutely no intentions of suing the Jackson estate or pursuing any kind of legal claim. And then he dropped the detail that made everything even more complicated. He admitted that yes, he had taken a personal DNA test, but he was emphatic that this private test had nothing to do with the media circus that had erupted around him. Whatever he had done privately, for his own personal reasons, was entirely separate from the very public spectacle that was now consuming his name and reputation. The phrase that stood out most, the one that journalists and fans kept coming back to, was when Howard said he had been taken care of very well. Now, let us talk about that phrase, because it is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, and everyone who heard it knew it. Taken care of very well does not mean nothing. In the context of a story about a possible secret child in one of the wealthiest estates in entertainment history, those 5 words crackle with implication. What does that mean exactly? Taken care of by whom? In what capacity? Under what arrangement? Howard did not elaborate. He moved on. He circled back to his music, talked about his artistic vision, and made it crystal clear that his priority was his career. Not celebrity gossip, not estate drama, not the endless speculation about his parentage. And somehow, that only made people more obsessed. Taken care of very well. Those words haunted the internet for years because they sounded loaded without ever fully explaining anything. And that lingering ambiguity is exactly why people kept digging, theorizing, and trying to turn speculation into certainty. But once you step away from the gossip and actually examine the evidence, the story starts looking very different. What the experts actually say and why it matters. Because for all the internet theories, viral speculation, and side-by-side photo comparisons, there is one thing this story desperately needs: actual evidence. And once experts started examining the claims more closely, a lot of the narrative began to fall apart. And the facts, according to people who actually understand DNA science, forensic analysis, and entertainment law, are not particularly kind to the confirmed love child narrative. Start with the DNA test itself. The fundamental problem with the 2014 test, the one claiming that 99% match, was the source of the genetic material attributed to Michael Jackson. A dental imprint is not a standard or accepted source for DNA comparison in any legitimate forensic context. The chain of custody, the documented trail proving exactly where that sample came from, who handled it, and how it was preserved, was never established to any credible scientific standard. Forensic DNA experts who commented on the case at the time were almost universally skeptical. The consensus among those who examined the methodology was that the results were not scientifically defensible, which is precisely why Wikipedia's documentation of the incident categorizes the test as inconclusive, not as evidence, not as proof, but as an unverified claim that did not withstand scientific scrutiny. Then there is the legal dimension. Entertainment attorneys who specialize in estate law noted at the time that if Brandon Howard or anyone representing him genuinely believed there was a credible biological connection to Michael Jackson, the legal pathway was clear. File a paternity claim, submit to court-supervised DNA testing using verified samples, and let the legal process determine the outcome. That process never began. The Jackson estate, which is managed by professionals whose entire job is to protect and manage Michael Jackson's legacy in the interest of his recognized children, never engaged with the claim at all. In the world of estate law, that silence speaks volumes. The fact that this claim received zero legal response from the estate is, legal experts argued, deeply significant. And what about Mickey Howard, Brandon's mother, mother, the woman who would need to have had a relationship with Michael Jackson for any of this to be true. Miki Howard has never publicly confirmed any romantic relationship with the king of pop. In an industry where tell-all memoirs and candid interviews are practically a rite of passage, the silence from the one person who would know the truth definitively is, at minimum, worth noting. The experts have spoken, the estate has stayed silent, and the legal pathway was never pursued. So what does this tell us about the real story here? And more importantly, what does all of this mean for the man whose name is at the center of everything? The real victim of this story. Here's the angle that almost nobody is talking about, and honestly, it might be the most important part of this entire saga. Brandon Howard is a talented musician, a man who has dedicated his life to his craft, who has spent years building a body of work, developing his artistry, and carving out a space for himself in a brutally competitive industry. And for over a decade now, every single conversation about him has been hijacked by a story he never started, never promoted, and has consistently tried to shut down. Think about what that means for a working artist. Think about the interviews derailed by questions about Michael Jackson. Think about the articles that lead with possible MJ son before mentioning a single note of his music. Think about the way his name has become permanently attached to a narrative that he has explicitly, repeatedly, and publicly distanced himself from. In his 2014 statement, Howard was emphatic about one thing above all else. His focus was his music career. He wanted to be known for his artistry, for his own voice, his own songs, his own vision. He wanted to build something that was entirely his, independent of anyone else's legacy, independent of any family connection, real or imagined. And yet, here we are, in 2025, and the most viral content associated with his name is not a song. It is not a music video. It is not a glowing review of his latest project. It is YouTube videos with dramatic thumbnails asking whether he is the secret son of a dead legend. There is something genuinely unfair about that. Whatever the truth of his parentage, and we have been very clear that the truth remains unverified, Brandon Howard is a human being with a career and a reputation, and the perpetual recycling of this story does real damage to both. The irony, of course, is that the story's continued virality is almost entirely driven by his unwillingness to confirm it. If he came out tomorrow and said definitively, yes, Michael Jackson is my father, the story would reach a conclusion and eventually fade. If he leaned into it, monetized it, and built a brand around the connection, the internet would reward him handsomely for it. His consistent refusal to do either of those things is, in a strange way, what keeps the story alive. The mystery is the fuel. So after all of this, the DNA tests, the viral videos, the expert skepticism, the estate silence, and B. Howard's own carefully worded statements, where does the truth actually lie? Let's bring it all together, because the conclusion of this story is not what most people expect. The verdict, what we actually know and what we don't. Alright, we have gone on a journey together. We have looked at every angle, examined every claim, weighed every piece of evidence, and listened to everyone who has had something to say about this story. So let's talk about where we actually land. Here is what we know for certain. Brandon Howard exists. He is talented. He bears a striking physical resemblance to Michael Jackson that goes beyond what most people would dismiss as coincidence. His mother, Miki Howard, was a working musician in the same industry and era as Michael Jackson. A DNA test in 2014 made a dramatic claim about their biological connection. That claim generated enormous media attention, and Brandon Howard's response to all of it has been consistent, measured, and focused on distancing himself from the narrative. Here is what we do not know. We do not know whether Michael Jackson and Miki Howard ever had a romantic relationship. We do not know whether the DNA test was conducted with scientifically valid samples or reliable methodology. We do not know what Brandon Howard meant when he said he had been taken care of very well. We do not know why he chose to take a private DNA test in the first place. And we absolutely do not know the truth of his biological parentage, because the only evidence that has been presented has been deemed inconclusive by experts, dismissed by the Jackson estate, and never tested in a court of law. What this story ultimately reveals is something fascinating about celebrity culture and the internet itself. A good mystery is often more powerful than the truth. Uncertainty drives clicks, speculation drives engagement, and when the subject involves someone as iconic as Michael Jackson, people will keep revisiting the story no matter how shaky the evidence becomes. The mystery itself is the product now. Brandon Howard has been remarkably consistent in how he handles this. He does not entertain it, he does not perform outrage about it, he does not litigate it in the press. He states his position, redirects to his music, and moves on. That kind of discipline, in the social media age, where every celebrity is expected to perform their trauma and drama in public for engagement, is actually quite remarkable. Does that mean there is nothing to the story? Not necessarily. The resemblance is real, the timeline is interesting, the phrase taken care of very well is still sitting in the air, unexplained. There are enough loose threads here that any curious person could spend hours pulling on them, but here's the truth that the dramatic YouTube thumbnails do not want you to sit with. We don't know. We genuinely, honestly, after 11 years of speculation, do not know. And unless Brandon Howard chooses to pursue legal verification, or unless someone with direct knowledge of the situation comes forward with credible, verifiable information, we may never know. What we do know is this: Brandon Howard is still here, still making music, still building his career on his own terms, still refusing to be defined by a story he did not write. And in a media landscape that is absolutely ravenous for celebrity secrets and legacy drama, that refusal might be the most interesting thing about him. So the next time a YouTube video with a dramatic thumbnail lands in your feed promising the shocking truth about B. Howard and Michael Jackson, you can watch it, you can enjoy the drama, you can revel in the speculation, but now you know what to do with it. That's all for today. If this video had you gasping, sharing, and sliding into the comments with your theories, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button because we are always in the business of finding out what the internet is desperately trying to hide. See you next time.